being here because you gave me a reason to be here. I love this plaza. Thank you. I want to thank the board members of the Plaza de la Raza who met me, Christopher Ariano and Liza Serrano. I want to thank people who have been a part of this program. LAUSD board member Monica Garcia, Assemblyman Jimmy Gomez, the great Senate President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon, who's done so much for Hillary. He was bringing your legislators from California and their staff members to Nevada at the beginning of this long process. And I'll never forget it. I want to thank President Obama's former Secretary of Labor and your county supervisor, Linda Solis. Thank you. I want to thank Angelica Maria. I can't believe she's been so good to us. I'm really grateful to her. And finally, let me say how much I appreciate Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Back in my office, two of my favorite pictures are standing with Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They make me look like a total shrimp, and they remind me of why athletics at its best can be truly ennobling. And both of them today talked to me about Muhammad Ali. And we were sharing our life together. And I want to say a little more about that in a minute. But I'd like you also to acknowledge the fact that your mayor, perhaps the most exciting big city mayor on the planet, and a great leader, not just introduced me, but has been such a terrific supporter of Hillary's and a great advisor. You know, tell me how you structured the $15 minimum wage. How did we get California to do it? How did they do it? And I say this because I know it's very close to the election, and usually at this time, people just speak in platitudes. But one of the main reasons Hillary should win this race on Tuesday and in November is it's one thing to talk about change and quite another to make it. In our family, it really matters a lot. We basically keep score. And our daughter does too. If you ask our daughter about the work we've done together in our foundation, you said, how do you know if you're doing better? She'd say, well, are people better off when we stopped than when we started? Do children and young people have a brighter future? And are we bringing people together instead of tearing them apart? I mean, so I really appreciate the fact that Mayor Garcetti actually thinks about how to do the good things that he's trying to do. Because if you really think about it, one of the big problems in America today, one of the things that's led to a lot of this outrageous rhetoric coming out of the other party and their nominee is that people don't believe it's important anymore how you do something because they don't think the system will ever work again. They think they've been shut out and it's over. If you believe that, Hillary's not your candidate. But if you believe that we can achieve broad-based prosperity again, that we have waited 8 long years since that terrible crash, we now have. And we thank goodness we had a president who's doing a way better job than his opponents getting credit for. And we've gotten almost 10 million new jobs. We've got 90% of our people with health insurance for the first time. We are just this close to being able to explode our shared prosperity again for the first time since the 1990s because we have the youngest, most diverse workforce in the world. Of all the big economies. Therefore, the people that want to build walls and demonize Muslims are bad wrong. We need everybody together to build America's future. Just remember this when they start pointing fingers. There was a time, I was in Torrance yesterday. Torrance has a higher percentage of Japanese Americans than any other city in the country. There was a time when Japanese Americans were herded up and sent to internment camps. When Chinese Americans made their way across the country, many came here over the Pacific, but a lot made their way across the country. Fortunately for me, as someone who was born in Arkansas, they were following railroad building, and a lot of them stopped. So that when I became aware of politics, one of my great friends was a guy named Don Lum, who became a distinguished doctor, but his dad was a mayor in a tiny town that was 80% African American. So there I was in a remote, fairly poor area, seeing then the benefits of diversity. Why am I telling you all this? Because this election is about some very big questions. Yes, who's got the best ideas to lift the economy of the American people, to give us shared prosperity with less inequality and more upward mobility? Who has the best idea to get rid of all the limits people face today in accessing that kind of economy? That is, we got to put a lot more money with a lot more incentives into really poor areas in this country, whether they're urban sections of LA or Native American reservations or coal mining communities in West Virginia, so we can rise together. We have to pass immigration reform because we've got too many people whose lives are so hung up about it. You ask anybody in the world who studies economics, they'll tell you America's the best positioned country for the next 50 years. And if you ask them why, every single solitary one of them will say, well, one reason is they have the youngest, most diverse workforce of any big country on earth. Why in the world would we keep playing cheap politics with the lives of 11.5 million undocumented Americans who are at work or in school, and the 5+ million people who are here who are part of their families, and keeping everybody torn up and upset when it's the dumbest thing I ever heard? That's very important. If you want everybody to participate, we can't be 19th in the world in percentage of women in the workforce, which is where we were the last time I checked, because we're one of only 7 countries with no paid leave nationwide. So Hillary wants paid leave, equal pay, and affordable child care so we can all rise together. You can't have this level of inequality because 2/3 of our income comes from consumption. And you can't consume if you don't have anything to consume with. Therefore, excessive inequality is terrible economics. So Hillary wants to bring a carrot and a stick to the problem. Carrot is we should give a 15% tax credit to every stockholder-held company that fairly shares its profits with its workers and their communities. The stick is we should stop letting the economic tail wag the business dog by saying you cannot get that big cut in capital gains tax by holding stock for a year and a day. You got to hold it for 3 years or more before you get the full benefit of that, because we are wrecking a lot of perfectly good companies by saying the only thing that matters is what's their stock a year and a day after the latest billionaire or activist investor brought it. It's bad. You're putting the cart before the horse. Companies are organized to provide goods or produce services. If they do it well over any 5 to 7 years, they'll make a lot of money, and those of us who invest will get a fair return. But we are literally living in a world today where, I'll give you just an example. Indiana, believe it or not, has the highest percent of its employment in manufacturing in America, 20%. Carrier Air Conditioning just announced they were going to cut that by 2,100 jobs by closing down 2 plants in Indiana and moving them to Mexico. Now, if they were doing it because they were losing money, we would say, well, good for you. We'd rather have the jobs there than 6,000 miles away. We wish you well. We thank you. The division made $2.9 billion last year. The profit margins were increasing. Why did they move? Sadly for them, somebody came out of the board meeting and told them like that. They moved because they had activist shareholders who said, even though you made $2.9 billion, even though your profits are going up, we don't think you made enough. We want more and we want it now. And therefore, we're not going to give your president his bonus, his full bonus. And the board actually voted. They said, oh, the poor president was embarrassed. He only got half of his multi-million-dollar work. And oh, these shareholders aren't happy. And they threw 2,100 people under the bus. Now, that should not happen, right? You all agree with that, right? Okay, that is more important than the banking problems because Dodd-Frank, this is why Hillary won New York so much, because the Dodd-Frank law has got 50 or 60,000 fewer people working on Wall Street today than they did before the crash. Wall Street can't wreck Main Street, but this quarterly capitalism obsession, I've got to make my money in a year and a day, can mess with our recovery. So we've got to deal with that. So then, if you get all these things out of the way, you have to make college debt-free for everybody, and you've got to make it possible for people to repay their debt. And I know it's close to the election, but I want to just do something on this. There's a difference in the campaign here. Should you have tuition-free college for public schools or debt-free college for everybody? Here's why I think Hillary's right about it. Number one, the tuition-free proposal requires all the states to pay a third of the match. And I don't think California can afford it. You're doing everything you can to hang on to your colleges now. And there's 30 states with Republican governors and legislators who don't want to do it. And I know Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New York, 3 states that in my neck of the woods who have Democratic governments don't think they can afford it. If you had debt-free, you could give everybody free tuition, not just at public schools, but at schools that are private, that have a lot of first and second generation immigrants, historically black colleges and universities, schools that deal with a lot of working class families and their children. Give it to the people who need it, give a big increase in Pell Grants, it's Hillary's idea, and then let people start paying a little when they can, and if they're caught in the middle, give millions, we're talking about a large number of people, the chance to work 10 hours a week with work-study money. That will give them money and help actually hold down the cost of college, which is a big problem for everyone. Now, if you do that, you can actually construct a model that can be fully paid for by the federal budget, let everybody out debt-free. The bigger problem right now is the debt that's already been run out. You all agree with that? I mean, everywhere I go, it's all people want to talk about. Okay, so here's her position on this. Number one, a college loan is the only loan you cannot refinance. That's insane. It's wrong. So she proposes to let everybody refinance their college loan. That alone would save 25 million young Americans $2,000 a piece. Number two, the average college loan is about $25,000. You know, it changes from the time she made this proposal 14 months ago, but you get the idea. So she proposes that everybody should have 2 options to deal with the debt they've got. One, if you're willing to do 2 years in an AmeriCorps program and 1 year in any other kind of community service, you would get tax-free, over and above your income, $23,000 plus to just throw against the debt and get rid of it. Two, if you can't do it or it's not enough, because let's say you went to med school or something, you owe 200 grand, you should have the option to turn it into something that looks like and works like a home mortgage. Think about it. Everybody in this crowd today, under 30, has a legitimate chance to live to be 100. And without the threat of Alzheimer's or other dementia because of the advances in biomedical science. If you believe that, an education is much more of a lifetime asset than any home you'll ever buy. Right? It is. It's worth it. So what Hillary believes you ought to be able to do is to have the option to turn your debt into a 20-year mortgage-like instrument, knowing no matter how much you owe, you can never be required to spend more than 10% of your after-tax income per month on it. And if you don't have it paid in 20 years, the rest is forgiven. Now think of this. And if you owe less, you would pay a smaller percentage. But just think what this would mean. What would this mean? This means you can move out of your parents' house. We're laughing, but it's a huge problem, right? I'm wondering how much Donald Trump paid for that train to come here later. Then, if you wanted to take another job that paid less, you can take it now because your loan payment will go down with your salary. If you always wanted to open a large store like this, in a place like this, you couldn't go to the bank and borrow any money today if you got a college loan. Your credit would be underwater. But you could under this system because the banker could see, A, what you pay every month is fixed, tied to your income. And if, like most small business people, you don't make any money for the first year or two, you wouldn't pay anything. It's tied to your income. If we did these simple things, it would liberate the energy of millions and millions of Americans, and we could all rise together, which is what we have to do. These are the kinds of things we have to do. Look, I just want to say, I'll give you one other example because I think this is a chance for us to get